How's it going? It's Jack with Jack Banks MMA, and today I'm going to be doing just the prelims, early betting ideas for UFC 280. All right, so we're going to kick things off here with the first fight that I think is going to be on the prelims, which is Rosa versus Lena Lansberg. I have Rosa as a minus 300 favorite here. I think she gets this done about 75% of the time. She's coming off of a loss to Sarah McMahon, but that was more of a grappling affair, and I just don't see... Lansberg doesn't have those credentials that Sarah McMahon has. She's getting up there in age, and I just don't see Carol Rosa losing to consecutive 40-year-old fighters. I don't have a ton of props that I like on this fight, so I'm really going to stick to the money line, see if that's playable either as a parlay or maybe straight if the line drops a little bit. Next up for me is Magomed Mustafa taking on Yamato Nishikawa. Now this was supposed to be Jamie Malarkey, and that would have been a better matchup in my opinion. Nishikawa's decent. Like he's really young. I think he's 19 or 20. But he hasn't fought the highest level of competition. And Mustafa has. I mean, he's the only guy in the UFC who's beaten Rafael Fiziev. The only thing you wish about Mustafa is he fought more often. The other thing I should say you could say about him is he doesn't like to be pressured. So I think if Nishikawa can pressure him, can push the cardio pace, Mustafa likes to fight at more of a casual, not casual, but a moderate pace, right? He likes to have things where he can kind of control the interactions, if you will, in the fight. So if Nishikawa can push a high pace, maybe make things a little bit uncomfortable for Mustafa, maybe he can get it done. I know I saw what the actual line is just because these UFC 280 lines got released really early, and I think Mustafa was like around a minus 500 favorite. There's no way I would recommend playing that. I understand if you will. I had him as a minus 300, 75% of the time, again, similar to Rosa. The reason why I'm a little bit down compared to the bookies is his inactivity. Mustafa is getting a little bit up there in age. He doesn't fight very often. He's had some injuries. Like, there are some question marks with Mustafa. If Nishikawa is a little bit more experienced, had fought better competition, I would actually be looking potentially to play him as an underdog here. But for me, this is going to be a spot that I pass on. Next up is Armin Petrosian taking on AJ Dobson. And this is a fight. First off, I gotta say I'm a big fan of Armin Petrosian. Gotta admit my bias here. He's a ton of fun to watch, except for his last fight against Kyle Bahayo, which we'll talk about a little bit later. He's a tremendous kickboxer. He has poor takedown defense, but a great ability to get back to his feet, which I think is going to be important in this fight because I anticipate Dobson will try to wrestle a bit. But Dobson really showed some holes in his game from both a cardio perspective, although I think a lot of that was because of the grappling and wrestling in his last fight against Malkoun, which he's obviously not going to have to deal with in this fight against Petrosian. Dobson is decent on the feet. He certainly has power. He's nowhere near as technical as Petrosian. He will be a little bit bigger, which I think favors Dobson. But the most interesting thing that I want to mention here, guys, is Petrosian. I think it was a few days before I'm recording this. There was a tapology, I guess, correction. That's the word I'm looking for. And he lost one of his wins. The fight, they say, never occurred. And I mean, we've seen them do this in the past with Oscar Mosarov. I believe that's what his name was. The guy who fought Alonzo Menifield. And Tapology is really good at this. So that does raise a little bit of a red flag for me with Petrosian. I still think he gets it done this fight. My original odds before I heard about that Tapology thing, which again, it's a little bit of a red flag. I would say more of a yellow flag at this point. Because Petrosian has gone on and fought in the Contender Series against quality competition, he controversially beat Gregory Rodriguez. I did have a bet on Petrosian in that fight, so I was quite happy, but I certainly understand that I was lucky to get a win there. I think Rodriguez won that fight. So I had it as minus 250 on Petrosian, Dobson plus 210. And I think as I get closer to the event, I'm probably going to drop that a bit, probably around to minus 200, just based off some of these yellow flags, right, that I'm seeing with Petrosian. And then Dobson would be around plus 170. So I think there's some value on Dobson right now, but I don't know if I'm going to take it just because I don't have a ton of faith in him based off of his performances in the past. All right, next up we have a couple of big favorites on this card. So first off is going to be Gelton Almeida taking on Shamil Abdurahim. Now, all right, let's just get right into it. I have Almeida minus 400, Abdurahim plus 310. I'm sure Almeida will be greater than that. It's just hard for me usually to go more than minus 400, especially because Abdurahim, he hasn't looked great recently, I know, but he does have an okay grappling background. Has his own wrestling. He's fought the who's who of the heavyweight division. I know he's on the decline here, but I still think we should give him respect as a fighter, and that's what I'm trying to do with the capping here. With that being said, though, guys, I did go back and watch Abdurahimov's performances against Marcin Tybura and Curtis Blaydes. Tybura was his last win. Blaydes, I think, is the most similar. I don't think Almeida is on Blaydes' level, but I think in terms of a comparison, he's as close as it gets. And so with that being said, guys, I like the under 1.5 here quite a bit. Abdurahim hasn't been going very long in his fights as of late, and I don't see that trend changing here. So I think under 1.5 minus 200 is fair. Next, the other prop that I think makes sense in this fight is definitely, speaking of fight not lasting very long, doesn't go to the scorecards, fight doesn't go to decision. I think minus 400 is very justifiable in this spot. And lastly, Almeida inside the distance, whether it's via submission or ground and pound, I think he gets it done. The performance against Blaydes, the takedown defense was terrible. Let's call it what it is. It was terrible. And I think Almeida has the ability to get the same style of takedowns that Blaydes did. The only question is whether he can contain him on the mat in a similar fashion. But from everything we've seen from Gelton Almeida, it's hard for me to doubt him until he has problems or until he faces really that upper echelon, that top 10, top 15, I guess. He hasn't gotten there yet of the heavyweight division. So minus 200 on Almeida inside the distance, I think, is fair. Maybe something I look to parlay come fight time. Now, next big favorite on the prelims, in my opinion, and in the bookie's opinion, because I've seen the line, it's higher than what I have, but I just told you guys I don't like going above minus 400 usually, which is 80%. This fight I am. Mokaev I have is minus 500, which is not, a great difference in terms of probability, but it says something to me in terms of my capping, because I'm usually not comfortable doing that, and I am in this fight. I think Malcolm Gordon he beat Dennis Bondar, but it was I don't want to say fluky, but it was a bit strange in the way that Bondar fractured his arm. He was trying to post, if I remember correctly, or it may have been from the submission actually attempt prior from Gordon, so maybe I shouldn't take away too much credit from him, but his previous appearances in the UFC have not been the best. So I like Mokaev, and I actually like him to get the finish. I've seen a lot of people talking about Mokaev via decision here. I think Charles Johnson is a better fighter than Malcolm Gordon, and for that reason, I thought in the last fight that Mokaev would have a tough time getting a finish. I don't see the same thing here, guys. I have Mokaev inside the distance, minus 150, not quite the same level of not necessarily confidence, but probability, I should say, as Almeida. And that's mostly just because of the weight class. At flyweight, finishes are less likely. So I think if you can get, slight negative money, but definitely plus money on Mokaev inside the distance, I would be looking to hammer that for sure. So next up for me, guys, is going to be Nikita Krylov taking on Volkan Oezdemir. I have this fight. I think this is going to be a closer fight than people think. I know Oezdemir didn't look good in his last fight, and Krylov looked phenomenal. But the thing about Krylov is his performances vary so much that I think weighing too much into how he looked against Gustafsson, who, where was his head at in that fight, right? That's I think a fair question to ask. So with that being said, as well as Oezdemir, Paul Craig stylistically is a very difficult fight for a lot of people. And while Oezdemir didn't look good, he also never was in great danger in that fight, which I think is a credit to his game plan and fight IQ in terms of that matchup. I have this fight kept. I do think Krylov deserves to be the favorite. He seems to be more he seems to be more on the incline. Like, he seems to be improving a little bit more, whereas Oezdemir might have plateaued. I think he has plateaued, actually. But that doesn't mean he may not be the better fighter at UFC 280. So I have Krylov as minus 130, Oezdemir plus 110. I'm not sure if I'm going to take Oezdemir as an underdog here, but it's something I'm thinking about, and I will be doing more research over the next few weeks or so as we get closer to UFC 280. Next up, as I mentioned earlier, is Caio Borralho taking on Mahmoud Morodov. So I've seen a lot of people very high on Borralho, and I think for a good reason. He's shown an ability to grapple against high-level wrestlers like Gadzi Umar Gadziev, which is actually a fight. I'm not capping his fight against Abubakar Nurmagomedov. I really don't have any good idea on that one. So if you guys have a good feel, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear it from you guys. So, okay, back to Borralho. He obviously trains with the Fighting Nerds, and he's trained with Damian Maia for, I think it's like 8 years. He loves to talk about it. And he's proven that has given him number one, a good base of jiu-jitsu, but more importantly, a level of confidence with his striking that no matter what happens, he can bring it to the ground and he's going to be in his world. So he fights really freely on the feet, which I think is important because he's going to be tested in this fight more so than I think people are giving credit for, because Morodov was finished by Mearshart in his last matchup, and I think people are discounting how good Morodov is. Now, that being said, I still think Borralho deserves to be a favorite, and a decent favorite at that. But I'm not comfortable going into the minus 200s with Borralho in this matchup against Morodov. I think if Morodov is a plus 200 or better underdog, I will be looking to play him. I don't think I will be going heavy, but like Morodov's number one, his speed on the feet. Not only with his hands, but with his footwork, which I think is going to be key here. Petrosian is a very good kickboxer, but his feet are a little bit slow, and that's why he's taken down so many times and so easily. I don't see the same thing with Morodov. Like, he's much faster. His footwork is phenomenal. He's very quick in and out. The only thing with him is he does slow down a little bit as the fight goes on. So I think as the fight goes on, Borralho will have more opportunities to get the fight to the mat. And I could see him, potentially dropping round 1, but winning rounds 2 and 3. 2 being close, and then he takes over in round 3. So with that being said, guys, I have Borralho as a minus 185 favorite. Morodov is plus 160. Like I said, if Morodov is plus 200 or better, I will be looking to play him not too heavy, because I still like Borralho, but I think there's some value on Morodov in that matchup. Last two prelim fights here. I think technically this one's going to be a little bit earlier on the prelims, but I skipped over it. And that's Zubaira Tukakov taking on Lucas Almeida. This is a very interesting fight because Almeida, I feel like we don't have a lot of information on him. He lost to Daniel Zellhuber, 29-28 decision. And Zellhuber did not look good in his UFC debut against Trey Ogden. So that makes me, curious. How good is Almeida, right? Because I really thought Zellhuber was a top level prospect. I still think he's good. And I think, part of that is octagon jitters, his first UFC fight. And at the same time, Almeida comes in, he gets his win, as Dana White had asked for before he got back into the UFC. And then he gets in and he has a back and forth affair with Mike Trizano. Now, when I went back and rewatched that fight, all I remembered was the knockout. But there's a moment in that fight where Trizano almost finishes Almeida. And Trizano's not necessarily known for big power. I wouldn't say Tukakov is either, but the big difference, though, is Tukakov has the grappling, the wrestling that he can always turn to. And I think that's going to play to his advantage. So I have Tukakov. I think he wins this fight about 60% of the time. So I have him as a minus 150 favorite to Almeida. Plus 130, plus 125. I do think, if you're going to play Almeida, I don't blame you. But I think Tukakov is the better fighter, and he's the more well-rounded fighter. And for that reason, I think I will be looking to play Tukakov in that matchup. The last prelim fight, guys, is going to be, honestly, it could headline a fight night. It would be on the main card and probably any other UFC pay-per-view, and that's Sean Brady taking on Balam Muhammad. This is a great matchup. It was a matchup they actually looked to book a couple years prior, and it didn't pan out. And I'm glad, honestly, it didn't, because I think both guys have been able to build their careers up, and they're really both looking to be, Brady's looking to knock on the. They're both really looking to knock on the door of that title picture, and I think both of them with a win here are one fight away from a title shot. They are very similar fighters. I think Sean Brady is the better grappler, but I think Balam Muhammad is the better striker. And I also think Balam Muhammad has better cardio. So, I think it's a close fight. And for that reason, I will be looking to play the over 2.5. I have it capped as minus 233. But I know you guys are curious about where I have the fight capped. And I have it kept similarly to how it is currently, because this has been on the market for a long time. Brady minus 120. He's the younger fighter. He has been on a bit. He's never lost. Not a bit of a win streak. He's never lost. He's undefeated. And Muhammad's certainly been on a win streak of his own. And I have him as plus 105. So a slight underdog. If the line keeps moving away or in the direction of Brady, I've seen Brady now minus 140, even minus 145. I think Muhammad becomes more and more attractive as a value play in this matchup. I think it's really a coin toss here. And Muhammad has shown an ability to prove people wrong. And Brady, a lot of people have really talked about him as the dark horse of the division. I think he's good, but I'm not as sold on him as everyone else. I think if he beats Balam Muhammad, I will have to change my opinion, especially if he does it soundly. But as of now, one thing actually I want to mention. If this was a 5-round fight, I would have Balam Muhammad as the favorite. I want to make that's an important distinction. So I think the fact that this is 3 rounds actually favors Sean Brady. If this were the main event of a fight night, I would actually be favoring Balam Muhammad. But like I said, if the line moves towards Brady, Muhammad becomes a bit of a bigger underdog, I will be looking to add him as an underdog play. So let me know what you guys think of my bets here, where I have the odds are for UFC 280. I think it's going to be a phenomenal card. Next week, I'll be breaking down the main card. Also, guys, just so you know, I post all of my bets on my Instagram, which is Jack Banks MMA, same thing. So if you guys are curious what I'm betting, you can check it out there. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.